Hi, good. How are you are doing?
Ladies and gentlemen of the media and the many persons joining us online, welcome to this special Leader of the Opposition Media Conference. My name is Imran Khan, and I'm the Director of Communication at the Office of the Leader of the Opposition. First of all, let me apologize to you for this unusually delayed start. We sincerely apologize, and we thank you for your patience. Thank you again for joining us. The procedure is, as usual, very simple. We will have a statement from the Leader of the Opposition. He will address a number of matters, and after that, we will take questions from the media, and the usual protocols will be observed. We will start in just a moment with the statement from the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Joseph Harmon. Mr. Harmon?
Yes, thank you, Imran. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Please do accept my sincerest apology for this late start. But as you know, the subject we're dealing with today, as I was coming into finalizing my statement, people from all around the world were actually sending me bits and pieces of information which they believe should be shared with us and all of Guyana. So my statement will basically deal with two specific areas, and that is to do with, first of all, the issue of the Sputnik vaccines, and secondly, the issue of the regional support teams. Now, after closing the National Assembly for over 90 days, and several demands made by the opposition, including demands by the international parliamentary bodies, the PPP was prevailed upon to call sittings of the National Assembly on the 10th of June 2021 and on the 14th of June 2021. Two financial papers requesting approval for expenditure of over $23 billion came up for consideration on the 14th of June 2021. One of these papers, including the expenditure of $1.996 billion from money which the PVP regime had already spent. They already spent this money just a few weeks after we had passed what they call the biggest budget in the history of Guyana. And just mere weeks after that, they started to dip their hands again into the tilly and started spending monies without the approval of the National Assembly. Several of these transactions, when we looked at them, appear to have the element of corruption. And these were all undertaken during the period of enforced closure of the National Assembly by the PPP. It is recalled that those expenditure were not budgeted for, neither did they have the prior approval of the National Assembly. The expenditure of $1,232,964 for the purchase of Sputnik 5 vaccines drew immediate attention of the opposition. It was discovered that the installed PVP regime purchased without any approval of the National Assembly 200,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccines for the sum of $975 million, and that they intended to purchase another 58,000 for $275,964,000. These purchases to be made from one Sheikh Ahmad Dalmouk Al Maktoum of the United Arab Emirates. And the prices which we were paying for these Sputnik vaccines, when we calculated it based on what the WHO had submitted, they were over $600 million in excess of what the price should be. The Minister of Health seemed unaware of many features of the transaction. One other revelation which the Minister of Health made was that he was a member of the board of directors of the World Health Organization until recently. I don't know if he's off now and Barry Amsterdam probably gone, I'm not sure. But he says he was recently a member. And that while there were vaccines which had been given emergency use authorization. And more than 1 year after this pandemic, the Sputnik 5 vaccine was still in a queue, was still in line, awaiting emergency use authorization. Guyanese were given the impression that by this government that, like other vaccines which were made available to Guyana, that the Sputnik V vaccine had been authorized. What we, of course, discovered from statements made by the Minister of Health was that that authorization was a local authorization from the Food and Drug Department, which is a department under the said Ministry of Health. So that is the authorization we have based on these vaccines which were ordered from a middleman in the United Arab Emirates that was produced ostensibly in Russia and that we are now vaccinating our population with. The PPP has placed the lives of thousands of Guyanese at risk by purchasing this vaccine from a middleman at the exorbitant price and kept this a secret from Guyanese people up until now. I have made a statement on this issue on Tuesday, the 15th of June, 2021, calling on President Irfan Ali to give a full disclosure on the issue. But instead, the Ministry of Health sought to give a response to my statement, but the response that I've given, it is distinguished more for what it did not say from what it said. They did not say, in fact, the PPP did not deny that it was involved in an international vaccine racket. The PPP did not deny that it was willfully and knowingly engaged in price gouging transactions. The PPP had not denied the investigative report by the Verdens Gang newspaper in Norway that Sheikh Al Maktoum had sourced vaccines from a Norwegian convict, Per Morten Hansen. The Guyanese people have a right to know more about this. Now, in light of vaccines being brought and bought from middlemen, and taking into consideration the global concern about counterfeit vaccines, and that is confirmed by Pfizer and other manufacturers, this matter of the vaccines purchase is now a safety matter for all citizens in Guyana. And it's a public health concern for the people of this country. We demand that the Ministry of Health provide us with the batch numbers purchased from the Sheikh Al Maktoum, the details of the shipping, including the transshipment, and the conditions under which the vaccines were stored. Also, all importation documents for the said batches into countries where the vaccines were stored. As a result, and for a matter of safety, the APNU AFC demands that these vaccines should be put on a hold until the population is given assurance that what we are dealing with is not a bogus transaction and that we are dealing with a safe arrangement. I know that there are concerns internationally about the Sputnik vaccine. And I'm not challenging the efficacy of this vaccine, but what my concern is about is that we get the real thing here in Guyana. Because there's a report in Reuters on the 16th of March 2021, and it speaks about fake batch of Sputnik 5 vaccines seized in Mexico, Russian Wealth Fund says. And I'll read a part of that because there's such a striking similarity with what is happening in Guyana, where this vaccine here in Guyana was authorized by the Food and Drug Administration of Guyana. And this is what the article says. Moscow Reuters. Authorities in Mexico have seized a batch of fake doses of Russian Sputnik 5 vaccines. The Russian Direct Investment Fund, which is responsible for exports of the COVID-19 vaccine, said on Thursday. Earlier today, and it quotes, Mexican authorities seized a batch of vaccines designed and packaged as Sputnik 5. The RDIF Sovereign Wealth Fund said, analysis of the photographs of the seized batch, including the design of the container and labels, suggests that it is a fake substance which has nothing to do with the original vaccine. The fund said in a statement, the first batch of the Sputnik 5 vaccine, a delivery of, and note this number, 200,000 doses, arrived in Mexico on February 23rd. It was approved for emergency use by Mexican regulatory authorities. The fake batch of 5,775 doses was seized at Campeche International Airport in Mexico. A government statement said it has been en route by private plane to Honduras. The bottles whose labels feature spelling errors in Russian were hidden among soft drink cans in an icebox. Images shared by the government showed. So this business of bogus and fake Sputnik vaccines is not something that is new. And so when we are to discover that the vaccines which we paid so much money for, which we paid an excess of $600 million for, that has only received the emergency authorization for use by our local Food and Drug Administration, we have to be concerned about it. It is the same thing that happened here in Mexico. The same amount, same 200,000 doses, same authorization process. And so as Guyanese, we have to basically ask that whatever we are doing about Sputnik has to be now made extremely public. We've been asking the Guyana Revenue Authority to supply us with all the relevant information in relation to this shipment or shipments of the Sputnik vaccines. In fact, we have already written the Gamaleya Institute that produces the Sputnik vaccine for confirmation of details, and we shall communicate this with the World Trade Organization and with Guyanese in general. I think it's a matter of our health. Our health is now at risk, and therefore we have to have all of the information as it relates to this vaccine. I have been on record as encouraging Guyanese to be vaccinated. The APN is on record as encouraging Guyanese to be vaccinated. But this, what has happened here, is now putting the entire program and the entire process in some level of doubt. And so I just want to make that very clear. The second financial paper, which was laid in the Assembly for debate, sought approval for the expenditure of $21 billion. And it also included some very clear features of PPP mismanagement of the affairs of the state. Immediately after its installation in office, Guyana saw a sudden return to large-scale narcotic trafficking. Almost every week, a drug plane is found in Kokwani or somewhere in the Berbice River. Sometimes it is found intact, sometimes it's found burnt up. And so those are the ones which we find. The ones which actually get through and deliver the shipment we don't know about. But what is clear is that there's been an increased level of cocaine trafficking into and out of Guyana since this installed regime took office. What is known is that there's been massive drug busts all across the world about shipments of cocaine coming from Guyana. Crime and violent crimes, the statistics are showing, despite the fact that the police refuses to make these statistics public, but it is showing that crime is on the increase in Guyana, that the United States Embassy has published a report which says that Guyana is a high-risk country for crime. This is only recently. In December, we had learned that the government, the installed regime, had released 65 prisoners who were incarcerated of various degrees of serious crime. The names of these prisoners, we asked that they be made public because they are now roaming the streets of Guyana, but those names are protected by the Minister of Home Affairs. So we don't know who these people are. It is also known that efforts are being made by the regime to place unsuitable officers at the helm of the Guyana Police Force so that it can do their biddings. Now, in the National Assembly, the sum of close to $210 million in the financial paper is requested for the setting up of a new unit called the Regional Support Teams. This unit, according to the Honorable Gail Teixeira, the minister with responsibility for reporting on GDF matters, said that this unit will be building a new building at Tetering Bang on the Guyana-Venezuela border. We'll be refurbishing a building at Ivleri. I don't know for what. What it is sure is that they did not provide a structure of this unit and how this unit will operate. What is clear is that they said they'll be buying uniforms for the unit, on equipment, including arms and ammunition, and over 32 vehicles, along with ATVs. 32 vehicles along with ATVs. All of these independent of the GDF or police budgeting. So that this secret unit that's being established by the PPP clearly shows that they do not have confidence in the army and the police to provide security for the state and security for themselves. Many citizens have drawn the similarity to the Phantom Squad, which operated with impunity on the previous PPP regimes, leaving thousands dead and massive destruction in its trail. I have taken note of a release from the Joint Services on this issue. But the release does nothing to quell the fears and suspicions of Guyanese citizens who lived through the troubled times under Barra Jagdeo presidency. The fact that this unit will be responsible to the chief of staff does not provide any comfort to anyone. Because several units the chief of staff would have responsibility for. And as the chairman of the joint services, you're talking about units in the GDF, units in the police. And so you can have units that are independently operating. So the fact that the chief of staff is responsible is of no comfort to the people of Guyana. We are going to object, and we seriously object to any return of any unit which closely resembles the Phantom Squad of that period of time, what we call the troubled times in Guyana. As a country, we believe that we are now blessed with resources and that we can take care of our business in a transparent way. Give the police the resources to do their work. Give the army the resources to do their work. You don't need to set up no secret unit. And in any event, we have given the police and the army massive amounts of money in the budget. And so they have enough. Only on Monday, Minister of Home Affairs came to buy more guns for the canoe. I don't know that there are old guns there. That's what he's saying. That's what he said in the National Assembly. So there is this reliance on more guns, more secret operations, and so on. And the people of Guyana must take note of these occurrences. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the two issues that I said I will deal with today. I know you have many questions, so I'm prepared to take those, but there are some other issues which came up in those financial papers that I will make the subject of subsequent press conferences. There are some other troubling matters there in those papers, in what we discovered when we were diligently examining these figures. So I now pause to take your questions. In fact, there's a part of a tape which I wanted to play on the first part of the presentation when we spoke about the Sputnik vaccines and the fact that we were boasting about having the highest vaccine rate in the region. A tape of a presentation made, I believe, yesterday by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley. So if we have that, Imran, could we line it up?
I want to indicate to you that the vaccination program in Trinidad and Tobago is as good as, and probably better than, most, certainly in the CARICOM and worldwide. And for that basis, I want to bring you up to date on where we at as a member of CARICOM. I brought a table here to show you what our position is. And I would ask you to look at the third column, which says total vaccines received by country. And there are 14 CARICOM countries there and 5 CARICOM associates. Of the 14 CARICOM countries, the only country in CARICOM that has received into its borders more vaccines than Trinidad and Tobago is Guyana. And the reason for that is that Guyana took a decision which we did not take. I've raised that at this platform before, but I raise it again. The Guyana government took a decision that Trinidad and Tobago did not take, and that is early in the proceedings to use vaccines that were not approved by the World Health Organization. As a result of that, Guyana had a larger volume of vaccines available. We did not participate in that, and that explains it. So if one is looking at WHO approved vaccines, it would be clear that Trinidad and Tobago got within its border more vaccines than any other CARICOM country. And that includes Jamaica, that has twice the population of Trinidad and Tobago. If you look, you see Trinidad and Tobago, this data is a couple of days old. We got within our border 234,700 vaccines. Jamaica would have got 194,600 and Guyana 287.
Thank you very much for your statement, Opposition Leader, the Honorable Joseph Harmon. Without any further delay, we will go straight into questions. I see a number of hands up, and we will start with Thandika Percival from Starbuck News.
Good morning, Mr. Harmon. You've noted your concern about the unit, these joint support teams within the region, for which in excess of 700 million has been approved, both capital and current. Also noted that you'll continue to object to this. Is there any move from the opposition to challenge, either legally or in a means other than via public statement, the establishment of this unit? And if so, when can we expect that to be launched?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I will let you know that we intend to challenge that establishment and the sum of money that's going to be spent on that in not only a legal way, but in other ways, which will be made public very clearly in a short time. But certainly, as Guyanese, we will not be able to live through another period where thousands of our sons and daughters were just slaughtered in the streets, and there is no accountability for their death. They are become now cold cases. And certainly we'll be establishing linkages with other bodies that are similarly minded. And certainly there's going to be a program of activities that clearly demonstrates our resistance to the establishment of this unit.
Thandika, go ahead with your follow-up, and then we'll take Kadaki Amsterdam, followed by Lisa Hamilton.
As a former member of the Defense Security Board, as someone who's in the legal profession, could you please explain to us your understanding of the limits of cooperation that is legally permissible between the GDF and the Guyana Police Force? Because what we've been told is that this joint support team will include members from both forces. So what exactly are the limits for the cooperation between these two agencies?
Thandika, that's an excellent question, because this is where the lines become blurred. The Defense Force's primary responsibility is border security, or the definition and how we deal with incursions and so on onto our territory. So border defense. And for internal security purposes, in cases where the police are unable to deal with the situation, then they can call upon the Guyana Defense Force for assistance. And that assistance is for a very short period until such time that the situation comes under control. The police force is about service and protection, and it is to the police force that we look for all of these protective services internally within our borders. The Army is only to be deployed in cases of emergency, and that emergency that has been authorized by the Defense Board and the chairman of the Defense Board, who is the president. So this sort of a mixture of the two forces is one which will require some clarity. And this is why people are likening it to how the Phantom Squad operated in the past. Because you are this mixture of elements. And now when we add the fact that there are persons of dubious character who are released by the Minister of Home Affairs back into society, it now puts you at a certain level of distrust when you see someone coming up to you with some uniform or something marked police crest on it, and whether in fact you should really take that person seriously. It's a very serious matter because you're meant to act in conformity with instructions that are given to you by the police, or in the case of an emergency, by the police and the army. But certainly, when you mix these things up, when you include criminal elements into that organization, you don't know who is who. And so citizens will be hesitant to deal with the law enforcement agencies when you start to tinker with their roles and responsibility as it relates to the security of the state. So that's a very important question, and these are some of the other questions which we have actually submitted to be answered, because quite a lot of the answers which we required were not provided. The minister was allowed to roam and ramble about a whole host of irrelevant stuff, and by the time she was to answer the specific question, then you're told, okay, enough time for this. But certainly, we will not allow that to prevent us from making the inquiries which Guyanese people need to know. And we submit those in written questions to the minister for them to provide the answers. Thank you.
We'll move to Kedaki Amsterdam, CAMS TV. Kedaki, you'll need to unmute your microphone.
Greetings. Am I allowed to ask a dozen questions?
We'll take two.
All right, let's start. Let's start with the same setting up of the joint support team. Mr. Harmon, when was the first time you heard of this establishment of this team? Was it during the parliamentary sitting or before?
No, the actual, it came as part of a financial paper requesting resources under the Guyana Defense Force. So on the face of it, it looks as the Guyana Defense Force is now coming for additional sums of money to deal with this team that is how it is stated in the finance paper. It didn't come across as if this was a new unit being set up, because the legend said that this was to provide additional resources for this team. But when I started to question the minister, I said, well, what are these teams? It was then that the minister made it clear that this was a new unit. So I said, if it's a new unit, it cannot be providing additional resources. This is for the first time. And she corrected herself, said, yes, this is a new unit being set up, and this is what it will do. And so we had the opportunity to question her thoroughly on that. So before the questioning, it was not publicly known that this was to be a new unit. This was an application by the Guyana Defense Force for additional resources for this regional team. I felt at one time that this was basically the Guyana People's Militia, that they were regionalizing the work of the Guyana People's Militia. But then, of course, that will have come under a separate heading. But when we started the question that is when it became clear that, look, this is not about the regular GDF or the regular police. This is a separate unit altogether.
Kidaki,
So
your
that is
second
when it was discovered.
My follow-up there. I told you I need about a dozen questions, but let me go to my follow-up.
I
given
think
the
I'll have to
lang-
give you a special appearance, Kidaki.
Sure. Given
Yeah.
the language in the request, additional resource, is the opposition suspecting that this unit was already established? And if so, have you done any quote-unquote investigative work to find out whether or not it's not an established unit already?
Kidaki, we have done our investigations. We've done significant investigative work on this matter. And I can say to you that this funding is for a new unit. I've seen the speculations and so on in the media about it going to fund a unit that's already there in existence. But we have to go by what is stated on the Hansard in the National Assembly, and by our own investigations, we will discover whether in fact this is in fact a new unit or that they are giving additional resources to a unit that's already there. I was a member of the Defense Board, and I sat in a position where many of these reports came. And so I have a sense, a very acute sense as to how these matters work. And I just want to give the Guyanese people this assurance that we will keep a very careful eye on it, and we will be able to determine whether in fact these are resources that's going to augment a unit that's already there, or whether there's a new unit. And it will be the responsibility, in large measure, of the Chief of Staff, who has gone on record as saying that what this unit is not. He will have the responsibility of saying what this unit is, and when it is established, who is the officer that's responsible for it, and things of that nature. So people have started putting out certain speculations, in my view, some very strong speculations, I must say, about the names of officers who are identified with it. But then we'll take a very careful look and see how it develops. What I want you to understand, and what I want the Guyanese people to understand, is that we will not play around with the security of the citizens of this country, and to the extent to which we have to engage other organizations, we have to engage citizens at large to make their positions known and felt on this matter, then we will do so at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Kidaki, we'll come back to you. We'll take Lisa Hamilton, Village Voice.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question deals with vaccination. Mr. Harmon, we know that on several occasions when the opposition raised the issue with COVID-19 vaccines, that ministers of government would have contended that the opposition is making more difficult the ongoing vaccination campaign and contributing to vaccination hesitancy. So, Mr. Harmon, I would like to find out whether or how the opposition intends to balance, voicing its concerns with regards to the Sputnik vaccines and the need for persons to be vaccinated by PAHO approved vaccines.
Yes, thank you. Very good question. First of all, let me speak about vaccine hesitancy. And this, of course, started with the PPP. There are certain persons who are ministers now in this PPP installed regime, who when we had patient zero, when we had the first death occurring as a result of COVID, said that this was a hoax. This was an APNU AFC hoax, and that there was nothing like COVID-19 in Guyana, that we were just using it to prolong ourselves in office. So all of that kind of propaganda implanted itself into the psyche of many Guyanese people who listen to these statements made by these persons who are now ministers. And now the same persons are now coming to say, take the vaccine, COVID is real. So people really want to know whether in fact you're serious or not. From the beginning, we have always taken COVID seriously. We established a joint task force, a national task force to deal with COVID-19. And on to the 2nd of August 2020, we had kept the number of deaths for over that entire period in the low 20s. Since then, of course, everything has gone Wild West. No specific plan for COVID, save and except the GDF boss every now and then come in, picking up people and packing them in and exposing them even more to the virus. So what I would say is that once the numbers started to climb in this way, in fact, when we meet 200, we kept a vigil for those persons who had died and to bring further attention to the fact that COVID-19 is not a hoax. We're now in over 400 today. Over 400. We have, in spite of the fact that the PPP has been resisting having our representatives on the National Task Force. And this is where you will get the information on vaccines and the number of vaccines ordered and where they're ordering from and so on. They've studiously avoided us sitting on that task force. But in spite of that, because we considered it to be a national emergency, when we looked around the country, we found that the numbers were rising and that in spite of the measures which were put in place, the wearing a mask, washing your hands frequently, and social distancing, that those measures seem to have been ignored to a large extent by a number of Guyanese. And so we felt it was a public interest. It was in the public interest that we lend our voices to the citizens taking the vaccines. I have to now make, of course, a distinction with this particular Sputnik vaccine. Because based on what we have seen since Tuesday, Monday in the National Assembly, and subsequently, the calls I've received calls from Ghana, where there was a scam like this. I've received calls from Norway. We have been in touch with reporters, Norwegian reporters. We've been in touch with people in Slovenia. We've been in touch with people in Mexico. All of these places where the Sputnik vaccine has had some problem. And they're all saying to us that the methodology which was used here of getting your Food and Drug Department that reports to the Ministry of Health, they are importing the vaccines. So it's a in-house business. But what is important is that the health of the citizens are put at risk. And that is very painful. They're put at risk. As I said, I will continue, the APNUS will continue to encourage that our citizens take the vaccine, but we make a distinction now. In fact, what we are calling for is that there should be a halt to any further vaccinations using the Sputnik until such time that the origins of this 200,000 doses is clarified. There are too many bogus vaccines on the world market. And when you are in fact buying from a middleman who is basically a businessman trying to make money, then the priority of the health of the people takes second place to the cash that can be made in the transaction. So that will be my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We have a follow-up from Lisa Hamilton, and then we will go to News Talk Radio, followed by Calvin Brown out of Jamaica, Tandika Percival, and Kadaki Amsterdam. Lisa, go ahead with your follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. I just want to know, Mr. Harman, I don't know if I missed it earlier, but is it likely that the opposition will be seeking data on the number of persons that have already been vaccinated by the Sputnik vaccine?
Well, that in itself is a challenge. This is information which is in the sole preserve of the Ministry of Health. And really to determine the number of persons, you'll have to set up another logistic chain that we don't now have that resource to do. But what I can assure you is that we will press the Ministry of Health for that information. As I said earlier too, we will press the Guyana Revenue Authority and any other agency which had to do with this batch, this 200,000 batch of Sputnik vaccines that came into the country. And where was the money paid? Where did it come from? How many places did it stop before it got here? And things of that nature. How long did it stay there? Whether the conditions under which it traveled was the ideal conditions. So all of these are questions which now come to mind. And as a responsible opposition, I believe it is only right that we question these things and that we provide answers for the Guyanese people. People are concerned right now because, the minister has been very strong on the fact that no one has died who has taken this vaccine or since they took the vaccine. Well, I don't want to question that because I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know about underlying causes and all of that. But I do know of a specific circumstance where it has occurred. And so I don't want to contribute to any public panic or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that we need to have a clear national dialogue on this issue because it affects the lives of Guyanese people. And it cannot be in the sole purview of the Minister of Health or the Ministry of Health. As I said, President Ali needs to make a very clear statement on this matter. This is not for Frank Anthony. In fact, from what I hear Frank Anthony was hardly even in the transaction. He is probably just carrying out the instructions from higher up. So let the higher up people come and answer. Let them tell us how they came into contact with the sheikh. And how did they satisfied, what due diligence they did, that what the sheikh was providing was the authentic stuff. Do we have the capacity here in Guyana to determine that? How the Food and Drug Department, what capacity does it have to determine that this is efficacious or it is not? Where is it? And you're saying now that you're telling this nation that, okay, we didn't have WHO approval, but there's a procedure which some countries follow, and we are following that same procedure. But at the end of the process, you don't have the competence and the capacity to determine, well, yeah, this is so or this is not so. In the National Assembly, MP Figuera questioned the ministers to whether we had the competence in this country or whether we had actually carried out any tests to determine whether this was something that could be used by our people. And he basically said, oh, they were relying on the tests that had already been done in the formulation and the completion of these vaccines. And so now to hear that all we are relying on is the Food and Drug Administration here in Guyana to tell us whether this thing good or bad, then we are in deep trouble. That is what I would like to say about that question, please.
It should also be noted that the Barbadian government has not yet approved the Sputnik V vaccine. We will take a question from News Talk Radio. Dennis Chabral, is that you? And then we will go to Calvin Brown from Wired JA out of Jamaica.
Yes, good day, Mr. Dennis Chabral, News Talk Radio, WR Waves. Sir, following up on the vaccines, should all the required information that you've asked for be provided and you're satisfied, to what extent will the coalition come out again and publicly endorse the Sputnik V as one that should be used by Guyanese in order to reduce any chance of vaccine hesitancy? And sir, on an unrelated matter, can you say at this stage, having received the briefing from the representatives of the International Republican Institute, what objections do you still have? Those are my two questions for the time.
Well, the last one first, Dennis. I think I've spoken extensively on that issue. In fact, since the brief, I think over a month or so ago, we've had no further briefing from the IRI. And so I have no new information, no updates on that matter. The first question you spoke about whether once we are satisfied about all of the information here, Dennis, we have gone out and encouraged Guyanese to take the vaccine. I myself have taken the Sputnik, first dose and second dose. I have done it. Many of my MPs have done it. And so it is not in our interest to kill this vaccine. It is in our interest to ensure Guyanese are not killed by the vaccine. Right? This is our interest. So once we are satisfied that all of the boxes have been ticked off, then certainly we will do what is necessary. But as of now, what is necessary is that we put a halt on things until such time that that information can be provided. I do not feel comfortable going out there and speaking to people who are taking this particular vaccine, when in fact there's so many questions about it that has been raised as a result of what the minister said in Parliament on Monday. But I will be the first to come out and say, once everything has been cleared, that yes, this has been cleared, and I am confident enough to stand before you and to say that this is a safe vaccine. I have it in my system. I took a while before I took that vaccine, as is publicly known. And I've said that people, even before they take a vaccine, should satisfy themselves. And maybe if you have the capacity to speak to your doctors to make sure that everything is fine. I took a while before I was able to be convinced and satisfy myself, along with my doctors, that I should take it. And I took it. I took dose 1 and I took dose 2. So it is a personal choice which you make. I have decided as a personal level, as Joseph Harmon, I'm going to take this and put it in my body. I cannot order anybody to put something in the body that you have no confidence in. And so I am saying that if that can be done, if that can be proven, that I'm prepared to stand up and say, let's proceed with it. But as of now, we have to be cautious, because this is just about the lives of Guyanese that are at stake. And in my view, I believe if we had done some more due diligence, that we could have acquired those vaccines from the authorized sources. That is my view. And that there are other vaccines that are WHO approved that we could have bought. That we could have bought. It is no mistake that Dr. Rowley in Trinidad and Tobago made it very clear that we were not going to go down that road, and that we will get the other vaccines. Even if you got to pay for it, you pay for it, but do it in a transparent way. We are doing things, all of the things, every transaction that this PVP cabal put their hands on, it's got corruption in it. Somebody got to make some money. And this case here, it is the health of the nation that you got to make money. We have seen it before under Jagdeo. All of the billions of dollars in expired drugs that were being purchased, or drug with a very short shelf life being purchased. Drugs being paid for well in advance even before it deliver, and sometimes never delivered. We've seen that. And so it is really putting a pressure on all of us, to accept that Jack Dio being central to any purchase of anything that has to do with drugs, well, after with pharmaceuticals, let me clarify myself, can be safe and be sure about what it is that we are taking into our bodies.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Indeed.
I have a follow-up, please, or two.
Go right ahead, Dennis.
Mr. Harmon, in your statement subsequent to the meeting with IRI, you did not say whether your objections were still valid or you thought that they were assuaged. So my question still remains whether you still have objections to the IRI having already been briefed. And secondly, why did you go ahead and take the Sputnik vaccine when in February 25 or thereabout, the Minister of Health did in fact say publicly that the vaccines were given emergency use authorization by the Food and Drug Department of the Ministry of Health?
Dennis, when you are doing public, you do public communication, and when you listen to an official and they use the word emergency authorization has been acquired, then where it's that emergency authorization, whether it is the Food and Drug or wherever it is, you are given that assurance, that satisfaction that there's been approval for this. And when you link it as the way it is normally linked with all the other vaccines that we receive here, we receive the AstraZeneca, we receive the Sinopharm, and then we still receive the Sputnik. But the others have emergency use authorization. So I am saying that I took that consciously, believing as an individual that this was emergency use was provided or granted. That's why I took it at that stage. And I have nothing more to say on that issue, as I said, for me personally. But what is happening now that all of these issues have come to the fore, the fact that there is an international ring that is selling fake Sputnik. I haven't heard about any of the other types of vaccines as yet, but certainly this is what we've heard about, and therefore we have to act on it. Now, in relation to the IRI, as I said, that was a brief meeting we had, one meeting we had with the IRI people. But so certainly the concerns that have been raised by Guyanese and the statements that were made by the PPP, particularly Anil Nandlal, has given thought for a review of any position with respect to that program. Because the IRI, they're saying this is a peace-building initiative, but what Nandlal is saying, this is an initiative to clean up GCOM and to lock them up for life and these kinds of things. And if, in fact, you have two different objectives for one project, then what we have to do is take the one that affects us most. And the one that affects us most is this arrogant position which is taken by Nandlal and repeated by PPP, that this IRI project is part of a wider project for which India will give support as well. But it is not meant for peace building. It's meant to reshape the Elections Commission. And what we have said to IRI is that our first task with respect to any elections has to be a revised voters list that is cleansed, and that house-to-house registration, we believe, is the best methodology in getting that list cleansed. So all of the peace building and peacemaking mechanisms, it can run, but the voters list, cleansing of the voters list is a priority. And we do not support any funding that will see the dismantling of the guardrails of democracy in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We will go to Calvin Brown out of Jamaica, followed by Mark Benchcop out of New York, and then we'll come back to Kedaki Amsterdam out of Buxton. Calvin, go ahead. You may have to unmute.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Harmon, just to follow up on Shabral, there was an organization that had indicated that in respect of the IRI proposal, why not look to the Caribbean and see what they have? And in particular, would you would you look at the system that now obtains in Jamaica? That is one that can be a model in the Caribbean. Would you be open to looking at it to see whether it or aspects of what obtains in Jamaica can be looked at in Guyana?
Yes.
And secondly, in respect of this unit, does its establishment require cabinet sign off? And if so, is it under the aegis of the Ministry of Home Affairs or the Defense Board? Right?
Thanks. Good questions, Mr. Brown. First, let me deal with the last first. The minister has given clear indication that this matter falls within the Guyana Defense Board, and it will be a Defense Board decision. So that is where we have to look for this, anything that has to do with the unit. It is now moved from the level of the Minister of Home Affairs, and it is being dealt with at that level of the Defense Board. But on the Defense Board, of course, it's chaired by the President. The Minister of Home Affairs is a member of that board, and so are several other key ministers, including Finance, the Prime Minister and Chief of Staff of the Army, and so on. So that once it was a decision of the Defense Board, those actors would have had to have some knowledge about what it is. And so the fact that the minister came out as if this way will pass easily because it's defense and security, I think she made a very serious mistake. Because we have a sort of a protocol in which some operational matters as it relates to the defense and security of the state, that they are not inquired into in the rigor as you would do with some other matters and so on, because we consider that to be a very special area. But this one stuck out, and therefore we had to go into the rigorous questioning. Even though the minister was seeking to invoke the protection of the speaker about that tradition, I don't think that could work. The question of the IRI, Mr. Brown, you raised an important point there, and it's something that we are prepared to look at, the Jamaica model. But at this point, I think once the suggestion was made, we believe that charity begins at home and that we are a member of CARICOM, and therefore that should be the case. We've had some bad experiences, however, recently after our 2020 general regional elections, about the way in which CARICOM and CARICOM leaders responded to us in our times. In fact, I myself have had the cause to write to the chairman of CARICOM, complaining about the obvious acts of discrimination that has been taking place in this country, and whether in fact CARICOM would need to look at this and at least make some statement or some inquiry as to really what is going on here in Guyana. You are prepared to do it during our elections, and so you have a government that is being installed. You have a CARICOM secretary that has not answered us for many of the letters which we had sent. And so I think Guyanese will be a little wary about going that route right now because of their recent experience. But as an opposition, I can say to you that we are prepared to look at the Jamaica model and to see how effective it is and to see how applicable it is to our own circumstances here in Guyana.
Yes, one follow-up here. In respect of the vaccine, are you prepared to ask CARPHA to do a determination as to whether it is a genuine vaccine or it's a fake?
Yes, we are prepared to do that. And we have already written some other organizations to provide us with some more clarity on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. We will go to Mark Benchcop and we'll follow up with all those who have their hands raised for questions before we begin to wrap up. Mark?
Hi, thanks, Eamon. Mr. Opposition Leader, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, quick question. I was reading some of the comments on social media about the amount of illegalities in Guyana, acts committed by the installed regime. And there seemed to be not much action at all on the ground. But that's not my question, sir. My questions are pertaining to the floods. What are some of the reports you have been getting from your members of parliament as it pertains to the flooding around the country from a health perspective? The other question has to do with the destruction of the Police Service Commission by the current regime, followed by the destruction of the Public Accounts Committee, the removal of its then chairman, Mr. David Patterson. And the other concern, sir, I know you've addressed it, but from an opposition standpoint, will you be writing to the international agencies and maybe the diplomats there, the US, the Canadian, the UK, etc., concerning the establishment of this illegal, this questionable police unit? And as you know, Mr. Harmon, there is a history, there is a sad history about such units in Guyana, the Black Clothes unit. And particularly in the early 2000s, there was involvement, allegations that notorious members of that unit, Black Clothes unit, was actually working alongside some corrupt US diplomats at the US embassy there, which came out in the Thomas Carroll episode. Have you guys, or are you guys prepared to write to international agencies, human rights body, the United Nations and so forth, to lodge your complaint against this questionable unit? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mark. You have this special way of asking some very short questions, but requiring long answers. First, let me deal with this Black Clothes unit, because it's easy for people to understand it in that way. I didn't make up that name. As you know, that in the early days when it was established, you and I had actually been part of an organization called Citizens Against Police Oppression, which mobilized resources to help persons who were affected by this level of police brutality that was being covered and executed by these shady characters, but covered by police, the police force and the police emblem and so on. So yes, certainly we've already drafted the letters to have them sent around the world. And now we've actually started to do that. We are seeing some results. The PPP installed regime, they're complaining, so y'all always writing all over the world. I say, well, it's the same world that you claim put you there, it's the same world we are going to remove you. Secondly, the question of flooding is a major concern. And I did not deal with it as a specific item today, but I said there are some matters which I will deal with at the next press conference. Because in the National Assembly on Tuesday, the Prime Minister came for $10 billion, which was to be spent as flood relief and and during this phase of the flooding. And this had only to do with preliminary stuff like campus cleansing material, in some cases, relocation of people, and so on. But it did not look at the deeper issues, the deeper infrastructure issues, which needs to be addressed. All around this country, the MPs in every single region and the regional democratic councils, and in some cases, municipalities, we have set up an operation here, the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, and it is called a Flood Emergency Center, where information comes into us on a daily basis. In fact, every 12 hours, we have information that says what is happening with flooding all around the country. What we've also done is to have gone into the areas that are flooded. Now, there is a particular point I need to raise here, and that because of what we had seen going out in all of the communities, all of the regions that are affected by the flooding, we felt that it was necessary when Parliament met to bring a motion to the Assembly for us to have a debate on the flooding. We felt that that was the appropriate place to highlight all of these issues as it relates to flooding. But the Speaker said it was not an urgent matter. You know, these things have to satisfy some requirements. It is urgent, it is unforeseen, and it is unavoidable. And he said that it was not urgent. So I could not understand for the life of me what could be more urgent. When the following day, the president declares a level 2 national disaster in the country. On the next sitting of Parliament, they come for $10 billion for the same flooding. But this Speaker couldn't find that to be urgent enough for a debate. So we are sometimes faced with people who live in an alternative reality. And to the extent to which the PVV does not say, yes, you can do this, then our Speaker finds some of the most strangest kind of laws. He went back all the way to 1831 to find something to say why you should do what you do. So flooding is a major issue for us in this country. The level 2 disaster, which was declared by President Ali, I think it is quite correct in the circumstance of what is happening here. What I do not, however, believe is that the allocation which we have to put to the resources for this flood, that those resources reside within Guyana. And I, as a Guyanese, I feel particularly embarrassed to know that Trinidad sent in a container of flour, milk, sugar, and oil, and these things. And we have all these resources in Guyana. We have millions of dollars in a natural resource fund, which has a specific portion that deals with emergencies. And yet, apart from the international agencies like the European Union and CEDA and so on, we are going around with cap in hands, begging people. Guyanese people are proud people. We have the resources right here. I recall a few years ago when there was a flooding in Trinidad. There's a flood, a whole part of Trinidad was flooded out. Prime Minister said there's a national emergency, but we will deal with the matter internally. We don't need anybody to come and give us any help. We will deal with it internally. We have the resources. We have that resource here in Guyana. I don't see why we should be brought to this level again as international mendicants. So, Mark, the question of flooding is affecting all of us. We have gone out and we have supported the Civil Defense Commission. I believe they're doing a fairly good job, but they are limited in what they can do. They are limited. And to the extent to which, as an opposition, we are able to supplement what they are doing, we are doing so. But from all the reports which we receive on the ground, the government ministers who go out there to distribute items, they are distributing first and foremost, first, last, and center to PPP supporters. PPP supporters. In fact, there's a report which we got from Kokwani that a certain minister Minister Edgel is on record as saying to the people, look, we give them people who vote for PPP. That I'm not, no, I can't look after everybody. I'm building no ark. He said that. So we have to make sure that our citizens are taken care of. And my fear is the management of the resources when it comes to deal with the issues that affect people in this country. The Prime Minister gave some very good assurances in the Parliament on Monday night. And I told him we will hold him to those assurances. We'll hold him to those assurances about equity and justice in the way these communities are dealt with. And that to the extent to which we go to communities and they complain to us, we will put it up. We will challenge his speaking about equity and justice. We will challenge Irfan Ali's One Guyana with what is happening on the ground. It's not one Guyana on the ground. It's green communities, red communities on the ground there. And I said to him before, we have to cut that out. When Guyanese suffer, Guyanese suffer. All when the flooding, everybody flooding. Some people are more fortunate than others because they can build in greater levels of resilience. They can build in walls and all of that because they have the resources. But some people have nothing. So when you sit and you watch at your house, underwater up to the roof, and there's absolutely nothing you can do but sit and wait on a hamper. We have proposed, and we will propose again to this regime that they have to consider, they have to expedite the relocation of some of these communities. Prime Minister speaks about 5 years and 10 years down the line. We are saying that people cannot wait so long. We have to expedite this issue because even by the time the water recedes, there'll be nothing there. And by the time this set of water recedes, we are already into another rainy season. So we have to look at long-term measures that will benefit and impact the people. And we believe that we have to start that consideration right now.
Thank you, Carmen. We will take our final set of questions, starting with Kedaki Amsterdam, followed by Dennis Chabral, and finally Tandika Percival.
Thank you, Imran. All right, Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Harmon. We've seen the suspension of members of the Police Service Commission. We have heard of this unit being formed. We have heard of the desire for policemen of questionable characters to be promoted to deputy, etc. Do you see any link between the actions in relation to the Police Service Commission and the police and the establishment of this new unit, presumably under the Guyana Defense Force? And we see, quote unquote, the abuses that are taking place in Parliament. Does the opposition have any intention of extra parliamentary measures to combat what is currently happening? Those are my questions.
Thank you. First of all, the question of extra parliamentary measures are measures which we discuss with extra parliamentary forces and resources. Certainly, we are prepared to collaborate with other persons to push that. But in the parliament, we are taking certain steps, and we'll continue to take certain steps where that is concerned. The linkage between the Police Service Commission, the establishment of this unit, and so on, I think you're quite right to make a linkage, because what you're seeing here is the mindset of the PPP, that they have to have their own security outside of the police, outside of the GDF, and that whatever it takes, they are going to set it up. And this is very clear. The matter that has been brought before the courts with respect to the work of the Police Service Commission and the promotions list for police ranks, I think that matter is coming up for a decision on Monday, or sometime very shortly, certainly. So what is happening here, this flurry of activity, it's all intended to try to quash the work of the commission. But when I look at the process that has been outlined by Irfan Ali, there are some flaws in it. I wouldn't address it much more here, but what I can say is that when that decision is made by the court, I think that decision will be binding on whether you're in the commission now or you were there before. And I think that the persons on the commission will have been receiving certain legal advice as to what course of action they need to take. This is all part of this mindset of the PPP, of Irfan Ali, and of course the president in the background, Jagdeo, and their belief that the only way they can have their will imprinted on this country is by people who are prepared to act unlawfully and illegally. That once you stand up for law and order, respect for the law, respect for the Constitution, that you run foul of those intentions. And I believe that all right-thinking Guyanese will stand firm in the face of these violations of our laws and so on. I think Mark had actually raised a question similarly connected here about the public service, the Police Service Commission. And so I'm answering Mark as well in this answer to say that the Police Service Commission, that what is purported to happen is that they are suspended and pending the establishment of an inquiry. But really, before you suspend them, you should have set up the inquiry. So I think that this time that they're trying to play with is to make sure all of these crazy things that they want to do happen before the court order. The president's letter on suspending these officers is based on what Mark Phillips said to him as Prime Minister. Mark Phillips asked Paul Sow and them to show cause, and Paul Sow showed him cause. I think the show cause had about 105 pages. But I don't believe you read it. You must give it to Kwame to read, and of course, nothing to read. So I don't think they understand what were the issues that were raised in the show cause. But they were set on a certain course of action. And whether or not the show cause came in and that there was cause, they were going to proceed on this route. And so they are proceeding along that route, but it's a dangerous route. That's the most I can say at this time. It's a dangerous route. And the people of Guyana, there's only so much that they will tolerate. There's only so much. The country is now in a state where every community we go to, people are saying how fed up they are with this PPP installed regime. How fed up they are. So
Final two
time
questions.
is of the essence. Time is of the
We'll
essence.
take the final two from Dennis Chabral and Tandika Percival. Dennis?
Mr. Harmon, Couple of quick ones. Could you say why is the coalition so silent about motions that have been tabled for the removal of the chief elections officer, deputy chief elections officer, and the Region 4 returning officer? And the PNCR leader has criticized trade unions for not doing enough to represent workers who have been laid off. Why the opposition itself has not been doing enough to represent workers, many of whom are regarded as your members of your support base. And the last one, sir, is the Attorney General says the procedure for electoral reform will essentially be a circulation of the bills to the opposition, publication in the media for public comment, and the consideration by the National Assembly. In effect, the opposition, he says, will be involved in the process twice. How satisfied are you with that mechanism?
All right, Dennis, let me say that it's like you've chosen a path, and you're now asking us to say, well, how good is this path? What do you think about it? From the time the decision is made about the path along which we should go, we should be engaged. You know, waiting until the train gone far away down the road, and then to come and say you consult with us. We have to be there. They have to understand that we are not just ordinary stakeholders. That over half of this country we support. The other half, a good quarter of it or half of it, are people who are in civil society and so on and don't support this PPP. All you have to do is to look at the response to the vaccines, when only 20% of the people responded, and they say it's AP and US, seem like the rest of the people in come, 80%. Well, that's our support, if you want another way of looking at it. But certainly, this way of Nandalal and company of deciding beforehand and then coming to you, that's not going to work. That's not consultation. That's you just want us to give approval of what you have already done. And we are not into that. When we're speaking about the electoral system of Guyana, when we're speaking about anything at all to do with the life and livelihood of Guyanese, we got to be in it from the beginning. You don't sit down in some smoky room and make your decisions and believe that we will have to go along with it if you throw in a little sweetener here, a sweetener there. It's not going to work. So we're not going to accept that. This motion on GCOM, the GCOM commissioners and people like that, they are looking at it very carefully. I think that we have made a statement on it, and we prefer not to make further statements on this matter at this time. We believe that whatever work is going on with that, with respect to that motion, is work that is being properly done. I think that will be.
No, the one about representing the workers.
Oh, the workers. Yes. Well, we have always represented those persons who are dismissed. We have had demonstrations for them. We have paid, and we've taken newspaper advertisements, making the world aware of what has happened. We have engaged the international community on their behalf. On every single engagement I have had with any of the bodies that are here, that was one of our first issue on the table. We have written international organizations to that extent. And so I believe that there is a certain level of awareness that's brought about by our engagement on behalf of those of the public servants. In cases where they have serious issues, we have actually gone to meet with them. There's a case of the nurses in Linden. There are other cases of public servants who are affected that we have come to their assistance. I have met here with representatives of the Public Service Union and the nurses' bodies and so on. I've met here and we've actually worked out some approaches that will help those bodies. But I think that the leader of the PNC has made a statement, and I suppose he has the information that will support that. But certainly, I don't think that it is correct to say we have not represented. We have represented. We have actually gone to court on certain matters, and have actually had some rulings in the courts itself. So I think that more needs to be done, more can be done, and it will require the collaborative efforts of all of us. But based on all of the pieces that are now falling into place, that shows that this installed regime, that they're unfit to manage this country, that the bulk of the Guyanese people have no confidence in them, that it is time that the rest of Guyana start to congeal, to bring that amount of pressure on this installed regime and let them understand they can't run Guyana as if it was a fiefdom and that Jagdeo and Irfan Ali are the kings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harman. Checking with Thandika Percival. Do you still have a question?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Thandika.
good day. Good day again. Mr. Harman, you just made a call for the suspension of the COVID-19 vaccination.
Yes.
Until, yes, verification of the authenticity of the vaccine.
Yes.
I examined the pieces of information that you related, included the fake vaccines that would have been detected in Mexico. Do you think, in light of the information that's there, that the call is a responsible one to make while there are hundreds of persons, thousands of Guyanese who would have received this vaccine, who are in line to receive this vaccine, and no direct link between the vaccines that have been delivered to Guyana and any supposed fake supplier? Because the supplier that you have mentioned from the United Arab Emirates,
yes.
While there are questions about their about legality of actions that they're going to take, and there's not been any claim that the vaccines that they're distributing are fake. Do you believe that that's the most
Yes, I think so.
call?
I believe so. That's a middleman. In fact, he has no obligation in the event of a problem with these vaccines. He has no obligation, which is, as far as we know, that's transferred from the makers of the vaccine to him that comes to us. So I repeat that call. It is about this particular batch of 200,000 that did not come directly from the Russians, that came from a middleman, and that given the fact that there's so many fake vaccines that are out there, that we need to be satisfied that this particular batch came directly from the Russians, and we need to know the chain of custody from the time it left there until it got here, so that there will be no question of spoilage and all of that taking place. So there are questions which we've asked, and I think that they are responsible questions, and I believe that the public need to be satisfied about those the answers to those questions. So I stand by my statement. Thank you very much.
Harman. And just to clarify, a point of clarification for Thandika, the opposition leader is asking for a suspension of the use of the Sputnik V vaccine.
That's right.
Not the other vaccines that are available that are WHO approved. Opposition leader Mark Benchkop has impressed upon me that he should be given the final question, and I know you will allow me to yield to him.
Yes, of course.
Just a point of correction, Mr. Opposition Leader. I asked, I didn't impose, but I wouldn't do that to Imran. But thank you so much, Mr. Harman. Recently, I've been watching in my interpretation, a cozy relationship between the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Meeks, and the members of the installed regime. Recently, Congressman Meeks said that he had a cordial discussion with Mr. Irfan Ali concerning COVID vaccine and a whole host of other stuff. And he met recently with a couple of them in New York City, Queens to be exact. Are you guys as an opposition, are you guys in touch with Mr. Meeks' office? If not, do you find it worrisome that as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, that Congressman Meeks is showing favoritism towards a government that has been installed without reaching out to you guys in the opposition? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think that Congressman Meeks has visited Guyana when they, I think it was last year. He did in fact have meetings with the PPP. I saw the report with respect to his meeting with President Ali on what it is that they discussed. But I want to say that the question of the Western Hemisphere Committee, which is shared, that we have actually been in touch with several congressmen in that committee. In fact, we've been in touch with the officers in that committee, and we have actually put to them the situation that is occurring in Guyana. I think they are very happy that we've reached out, and we've agreed to continue reaching out and provided them with information. Congressmen, of course, will meet with different people. I can't stop Congressman Meeks to meet with anybody, whatever statements he wants to make, because that is the strength of the American democracy. While at the same time, there are other congressmen that we will speak to that certainly would have a different view from what Congressman Meeks has. So I would leave this one at that, and to let you know that what we will do is also provide Congressman Meeks with updated information on what is taking place here in Guyana, so that at least he will have a clarity of thought when he's meeting with persons from this installed regime, and not be swayed by the gaffe that takes place on what they've tried to do. That he can balance what he's hearing from what they are saying and what we have said. And this is why we try to reach out internationally all the time, even on the radio stations that are in the US, your radio station and several of the others who are based there, so that people have a day-to-day feel of what is taking place here, and that one congressman who goes out and says something, that it will not necessarily have the same impact as the hundreds of congressmen and senators that we have actually sent our information to. So I would leave it at that. And finally, to say that this questions we had just now about the middleman and the vaccine and so on, I think at one point he said, oh, he didn't make a profit on it. And then went on later on to say, oh, it was a good deal. It was a very good deal. So I don't know what's a good deal if you didn't make a profit on it.
Mr. Harmon, quickly, if you'll permit, if more people begin to fall sick and possibly die as a result of the vaccine hesitancy, are you willing to take some responsibility for that if less people take the Sputnik vaccine, and if government refuses to provide the information that you're demanding?
Well, Mark, that would be on their shoulders, not mine. I am with the people. I am standing with them. I have encouraged them to take the vaccines. But I've said, I put a caveat that this particular batch, we need to have clarity on it. So don't put me in a position where there's hesitancy with respect to any other vaccine, for that matter. It is the regime that has kept this a matter of secrecy and made it a financial transaction rather than putting the health of the Guyanese people first. So I would not accept any such labeling or any such responsibility. As I said, we've continued to give support to the need for people to be vaccinated. We continue to call on all Guyanese to wear your mask, to wash your hands frequently, sanitize, social distancing. Even though I say this, I recognize only recently that the government has put on a 40% tax on soap. So even though we are encouraging people to wash their hands frequently, this regime, they're taxing the same soap that you got to use to wash your hands. So I just want to encourage you, in spite of all of these harassment that you face, that we continue to be safe, that we look after our neighbors, our families, and in such a way we'll be able to look after all of Guyana. Vaccine is an important fight against the COVID-19 disease. Just as these other measures I have pointed out that are WHO measures. But what I'm saying, and I repeat again, that this batch of 200,000 vaccines, the Sputnik V, that we must have some clarity on it. And that clarity has to come from Irfan Ali, Barra Jagdeo, Frank Anthony. They have to speak to it. And they have to provide that clarity. We will do our own background checks as well. But they are the ones who have to come out and speak to this matter. I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Opposition Leader, the Honorable Joseph Harmon, for hosting this very lengthy and comprehensive press conference. I believe this has been your longest press conference since August 2020. We thank you very much for entertaining the wide number of issues that you have addressed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. If you are living in a flood-prone, low-lying area in Guyana, we ask you to take all precautions and try as best as you can to remain dry. Do have a good rest of the day and good rest of the week. Until we meet again, goodbye.